come once again to discuss things.
Give it a go.
Alright. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
A geek for fun.
Indeed. And Alfie, you picked our review topic, which is the first arc of Scott Snyder's Justice League run. What made you want to talk about this?
Well, apart from just wanting to see you seethe, writhe, wriggle with fury, I need some kind of entertainment on this channel. I also feel like it's been getting a lot of buzz lately. It's seemingly, for people reading current, going into its final arc or the climax, shall we say, of a lot of things I've been building. So it's been on my mind. And it's something I feel is worth talking about, especially in regards to, we talk about a lot of DC and the universe of DC on here. This book is really integral to what DC is right now in terms of the universe and what the company's shifting tone has been since. Like, if you want to say that Rebirth #1 established that era and Jeff Johns' Justice League was like indicative of the New 52, I really do feel like Snyder's Justice League is the era we're in right now, and I wanted an excuse to kind of talk about that.
That's interesting, because I'm of the opinion that Rebirth hasn't really changed all that much since it started. Like, there's been some kind of... I mean, it's amazing. It took us only a couple years to start getting really meta, but we've gotten there with stuff like Heroes in Crisis. But I don't think, like, the overall tone has shifted too much. I feel like there was... You know, the double shipping, I knew that had to end at a certain point. And it amazes me that there's still any books still doing that. But ultimately, you know, I read this, and it doesn't feel all that different from kind of what Rebirth started out being to me. So I guess I'm interested to see what you think the significant difference is.
Yeah, I feel like maybe... Because this is more so... It's not a dramatic shift, but I feel like this was something that Rebirth was building towards, whereas this is finally just... encapsulated that, I think is the best word. And I definitely think since Bendis coming on and won the comics and his new initiative paired with this at the same time, and all the other Justice League books, and when the push for Odyssey happened, and all of that stuff came out as like a wave, and there's been years between them, but it has kind of felt like building on each other. This does feel like a new era for DC, not as dramatic as New 52 to Rebirth, but I do feel like it is different enough in the Superman books, from like the Rebirth Superman books, and the Bat books are in a different place than they were at the start. Like, even Tom King's run is still the same story, so that's the one outlier. But I feel like everything around has slowly been shifting. Not to like a tonal sense, but I feel like the scope has expanded.
I think that's a fair assessment. It's so rare for me to, like, as much DC as I read, you'd figure I'd be higher up on like what's going on continuity wise, but so much of what I read DC is just like, yeah, continuity's happening over there, now here's the good stories. Like, I don't know, I'm not reading Doomsday Clock, I'm not reading Justice League, I'm not reading every fucking event. I'm actually reading Leviathan stuff and getting less and less interested in it as it goes on. There's a lot where I'm just like not into, like, I'm not plugged into continuity. You know, it's the Green Lantern that has nothing to do with continuity, and it's beautiful for it. There's so much where I read so much DC, and yet I have no idea what's going on in the universe proper. Like, I still have to remind myself every so often that, like, oh yeah, the fucking Justice Society doesn't exist anymore, but they're like trapped somewhere or something, right? Oh yeah, that's what's happening with me.
Well, I mean, I'm glad I did this then because there you have now the first arc of DC's current continuity premise. What did you think?
I mean, I'm gonna bury the lead a little bit here. So, Scott Snyder and this channel have a storied history together where I got pissed at Endgame and I talked about how I thought it was a really fucking bad book. And I kind of got too big for my britches and I added Scott Snyder in it on Twitter. And Scott Snyder left a comment that made me look like a fucking dick because he kind of took it just in stride. He's like, hey, sorry you didn't like the book. And I'm like, oh, that's awkward. So, like, ever since then, anytime I've talked about Scott Snyder, I've been, like, really, really hyper aware of everything I'm saying, and, like, I'm pretending he's in the room when I say it. It's not very good. It's okay. It's not great. It's got good character. It's got a good voice for Lex Luthor. I enjoyed the banter. The plot is just it's too much. There's like 12,000 things happening. And I hate to do it, but I'm going to do it. It feels like he's trying to be Morrison and he's just not. Like, if Grant Morrison wrote a story about a magical doorknob that opened a thing that came from beyond the source wall, and Lex Luthor was the only one to get in contact with it, and it had all been building up since Vandal Savage thousands of years ago, I'd been like, yeah, that's a pretty basic Grant Morrison story, and I bet it'd be told really well. This, I'm just like, God, there's so much happening. What is it? It's connected to how fucking the Martians died, too? Really? We're going back there again? Like, how many deaths have the Martians had that were, like, the thing that it was, like, this big event, you know? It's the White Martians and the burning and stuff. I'm just like, there's so much. How many mass extinctions did John Jones live through? So no, I didn't particularly care for the story. What got me through were like the cool kind of fun moments, and I did think the character work was pretty strong. Issue 1 with all the Justice League members trying to do their Batman impression, and then they go to Superman and Superman's like, no, I can't. And then issue 7 when Superman does his Batman impression and the fucking lettering changes, I laughed. I thought it was really funny. Someone on the comms or whatever said, shut it down! And that was really funny. I don't know who would have been the one to say that. I think it was supposed to be Flash, which just does not sound like his personality at all. So, like, there are things I definitely like about it. And you know, Scott Snyder's kind of always had that, where, like, he has those moments where he writes stuff that's, like, kind of legitimately cool if it were on its own, and it just didn't have all this Snydery baggage. Like, you remember the one issue of his Batman run where, like, Batman puts on a Batman Beyond costume? Like, that's a really cool moment. Every time I think about it, though, I'm like, what the fuck? This doesn't make any goddamn sense. It's too expensive to use? Since when has that been a problem for Batman? Like, just shit like that. I don't know. There's like cool things about Snyder's writing. It just doesn't all come together very well for me. And at this point, I'm not even sure if it's his fault, you know? Like, I think that I think it would be very hard for me to read any Scott Snyder comic. It could be like his magnum opus, and for me to enjoy it. Like, it's just, I grew such a distaste for his writing style that, like, even really innocuous shit just irks me about it now. And so, like, I don't feel like I can give him a fair shake. Because, legitimately, there are things he's doing here that I like. And I still just didn't care for the whole thing overall, because I feel like I'm just I'm in too critical a mode when I read it. That and when we got to the last page of the last issue and the fucking Batman Who Laughs showed up, I rolled my eyes.
I feel you on that one at least.
Yeah. I don't know. So like I read this and I didn't like it, but it's probably more my fault than it is anything in particular about what Snyder's doing. Is that a fair assessment?
I mean, that's a really interesting assessment. I think it's incredibly interesting and honest to be able to be like, have such a weird relationship with a creator like that, or like their style. And I think maybe more people who, like, I think a lot of people have that with Tom King. So I think maybe admitting that into discourse is a more healthy way. So no, I can see where you're coming from with your history of that story. So no, I feel like overall I can see parts of where you're saying. I do think as the run goes on, he gets better at terms of, because I feel like I agree with you on one point. I do think there is so much in this first art, so many concepts thrown at you all at once, and all of them are really, really cool. But it's one of those things where I can tell the sense is this is meant to be overwhelming from the get-go. This is meant to put you in the character's shoes where you're like, oh my god, this is a whole new world. I can't comprehend all this information all at once. How do we do? But I feel like maybe that's an interesting thematic approach to take, to put you in the character's headspace there. But I can see why narrative-wise that kind of idea doesn't really work when it's a good idea on paper. But when you put it into a story and you overwhelm a reader with information, they're not going to go away thinking, wow, I was just as confused as the characters. They're just going to go, I was confused, or I was overwhelmed, I didn't know what to focus on. So I can see that. But I do feel like just how I enjoy these comics and especially how Justice League as a book has been treated before Snyder came on, and for a bit after Morrison left, I'm kind of fine with that at the expense of getting so many cool new ideas at once rather than getting any. And that's where I feel like Snyder's strength is, for me, is sure, Morrison is definitely a big inspiration from him. But how? If every writer in comics took big inspiration from Morrison, we'd be in a much better place.
Oh, I agree with that.
So putting him on Justice League and having him be DC's golden boy to like steer the ship in a way that I feel like Snyder's best influence on the public as a whole, especially the more casual fans, is that he delivers Morrison's takes in a more casual way.
Yeah, he's Diet Morrison. I've said it a million times.
That, but in like a more kind way, where I think that has had a positive effect. I feel like being able to not necessarily dumb down, but just a different approach where some people can pick things up in a more less hyper time, all over the place manner helps. This is him kind of straying away from that and trying to just do how Morrison tells stories, and I do think it's not as refined. But there are parts in this where I feel like his strength does shine, which I agree is the character work. And in a book like Justice League, where you're bringing all these characters together and you can't really develop them because they've all got their own individual stories, character work and interaction is the heart of this book. And knowing that gets nailed, and at least you enjoyed those parts, makes me see, well, at least this is doing the core concept of a team-up book.
Okay. And so here's me with my fucking, like, perfectly sharpened needle walking up behind you in your beautiful red balloon, okay? The character work is good. It's too bad that they don't hang out with each other more. Alright, so one of the things that Morrison really, really nailed when he did Justice League is he understood the need for the scope of the threat. So, like, if you're writing a Justice League story, why can't Superman just solve this problem on his own? Why can't Wonder Woman just solve this problem on her own? Why do you need the team? And I think that Morrison did a really good job in each of his arcs of Justice League of creating a threat that really did require the whole team to take it on. And to Snyder's credit, in this first arc, he creates threats that really do feel like they need the whole Justice League to take him on. The problem is he puts like 6 in one issue, or in one story, and because of that, it's almost just like each issue is a different team member's solo book, and that feels weird. So it doesn't even feel like we get like proper team interaction, because the characters are so almost all like off on their own little solo missions. Like, yeah, Batman's working with Superman, but he's not really. He could be halfway across the universe, essentially. Like, what Batman's doing is important to Superman's story in this, with the whole Fantastic Voyage thing. Same with Hawkgirl. But it's just like because he's not really getting a ton of chances to interact with Clark, it kind of loses something. Yeah, Flash and Jon Stewart like kind of come up with a cool plan together, and they're trying to motivate each other at the same time. But like they're literally, it's all just like walkie-talkie talk, you know? There's no like, you know, helping each other up, like literally on panel kind of stuff where they're working together and you get to like see it. Like the Justice League show has like one really, really great scene where it's like they need to get something and throw it into the sun before it like creates a black hole and eats the earth. And Superman's not fast enough to fly to the sun, and Flash is fast enough to run to the sun, but he needs ground to run on, but they don't have ground, so Green Lantern has to like make a bridge with the ring for the Flash to run on. And it's like a really good like team moment. And I don't think that this has that, where like their skills are really playing off of each other and allowing them to, as a team, as a unit, overcome stuff. Like, that's not 100% true. Like, there's stuff here and there, but it really did feel a lot more limited, or almost a lot more isolated. Like, the moment that comes to mind that like kind of feels that way, and I want to try to give it credit, is like, okay, Barry needs to focus on the Still Force, but Black Manta and Grodd and Cheetah are about to like blow up the thing they're in. So Aquaman has to breach through the wall to go command the Sea Life to take out the bad guys. Wonder Woman's gotta fucking plug the gap. It's literally just like a fucking piece of duct tape could have done that. Okay. Wonder Woman's gonna plug the gap so that Barry doesn't drown while he's trying to do his thing. And so each of these goals, from a narrative sense, are important to each other. But do you at least kind of like see what I'm getting at, where like they're each little like solo missions. They don't feel like they're like really helping as a unit. They feel like they're all kind of just doing their own little solo mission.
No, I can totally see where you're coming from. That is an aspect I hadn't really paid much attention to, but I think you are right. There is a lack of I guess you could say the dual punch. Here are two people in the same place working together to defeat a single foe or stop a single problem, like in very close proximity to each other, kind of like on panel together. Mm-hmm. The only time I can really think about that is when Cyborg and Jon Stewart do like a dual beam attack against Sinestro.
And it doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, that's a cool moment for Sinestro, though, so I'll give him that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think that is an issue. I think that's... And unfortunately, that is something that does persist in the run. I do feel like maybe it's a problem in that sense, but I do feel like it enhances some strengths that come with that kind of approach, where you do get to focus on the individual heroes a little bit more, and give them a little bit more like I could say, like Jon Stewart goes through like John. Both the Johns in this arc seem to be the focus, so it's going to get confusing. Me say John backwards. I'm going to
Just
say
say
Mark
Jones.
Yeah, Jones. So John and Jones both kind of get a focus in that arc, in this arc, kind of going over the idea of shame, which is like what the ultraviolet spectrum is. So both of them have like a different shame that they eventually learn to get over and just talk about, which is a really interesting message for those two characters. And I feel like it's a smart move because those were like the new additions to the roster and giving them initial focus work. And by maybe making it a little more isolated, I think it does kind of back up the idea that, again, it would be better if this was the one instance of this, because then I could make an argument that, oh, well, because Johns was told by Superman, hey, you're isolating yourself from us, but you're just connecting us. What's the problem? And then he gets over that in this arc, and then the future arcs, there's more interaction. I'd be like, oh, that's an intentional narrative thing. But because in future arcs, there are still very separate team missions with individual solo heroes doing stuff, I can't even give it that credit. So I do think you're onto something there. I do think that's a valid point. Yes.
Yeah. And so like that's kind of the problem for me, because like I like the idea of the ultraviolet spectrum, but it's really something that deserves its own arc to really feel the threat of it, because like it's a lot of show don't tell kind of problem. Like they talk about, oh, Sinestro's got the biggest core in the universe now because the light controls them, and it's like, yeah, but it takes them like 3 issues to try to punch through the roof of the Hall of Justice. Really? Like, and then it's like, oh, we're summoning this dark eldritch force or whatever the fuck is the root of it. I don't even have a concept for it yet, because there's not enough time to focus on it, and it's all being summoned and controlled, or the Earth has been transported or some shit because of the ultraviolet spectrum, and I'm just like, I don't have enough time to really feel the scale of the threat, because there's so many different threats happening all at once. Like, this feels like it's the Legion of Doom. Okay, there are your types of Justice League stories, right? There's the Legion of Doom, where the villains team up. There's the big alien threat. There's like the kind of supernatural disaster. Like, these are all your types of Justice League threats. And then there's, I guess, your like team member from the inside going rogue. And now that I think of it, this goddamn arc has all of them. And that's ridiculous. I'm sorry, but when you really think about it, you piece it together in that way, it's just too much. Like, did Scott Snyder know he was getting more than 7 issues on a Justice League book, or did he really feel like he had to just put them all in one?
I mean, maybe to the credit, this is the smallest arc.
Was that supposed to help?
I mean, it shows you that in context for this run only, this is the introduction arc.
Yikes.
I will say, in scope, not so much in the number of threats. So maybe that would like alleviate. Like it doesn't. I do think this is the biggest problem of Still Force Grodd could be an arc villain. Ultraviolet like Sinestro could be an arc villain. Putting them both at once too much. I'm with you there.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen again. It's just the individual threats get bigger, which I think alleviates the problem somewhat. I do think though that to get the sense of this is the greatest Justice League team, this is the greatest Legion of Doom, I will give it some credit that because of how big the threat is, I do really like the moment at the end of, I believe it's issue 4 or 3, where it's just inside Lex Luthor's head, and like it's the issue before the Legion of Doom issue, where it's just like, okay, they've won. The villains have just there's no way out of this hopeless situation. Because normally, when Justice League runs do this, I'm always left as a writer by myself being like, oh yeah, there's a way out. Oh yeah. They can solve this. Oh, they could do this. They could do that. Like it's very rare for me to finish an issue and be like, well, they're fucked. So this gave me that feeling. I don't know if that gave it to you in a positive or negative way, though.
I I guess like it definitely does feel like there's just they are up against a wall, and it's kind of fun to see how they're getting out of it. But at the same time, I'm like, man, it's just so much. Like I'm trying to pull up part of issue 1 on my phone real quick because I want to try to comprehend something. Okay, so it actually starts on page 7, which is annoying. 8, 9, 10. Oh, hold on. We're at really page 3. 4, 5, and then John turns into the giant dragon. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So not even that, really. So, like, when you get to the mind boardroom, which, again, it's a cool idea. I like it. So we're not even, like, 10 pages in, and we've already got a Justice League story. You know, we've got a proper threat for, if not an arc, an issue. You know, Vandal Savage's whole plan to break up the Earth with Neanderthal soldiers. And so, when I was initially reading that, and it, you know, it gets to John's, he's got to go, like, destroy the moon, and Batman's got bombs planted on the moon, I'm kind of there for it. I'm actually kind of into it. I'm like, okay, cool, we're doing the whole, you know, open with action thing. That's a good choice. But I just can't help but feel like there's just so many ideas floating around that it's just, it gets buried. So what should be a strong choice ends up feeling weaker by the end of the arc for me. So, like, you talk about, oh man, by the end of this issue, things just seem hopeless. There's really no way out of it. Yeah, but, like, I mean, the fucking Earth is breaking up and John has to turn into a goddamn creature that we've never heard of. There were, like, by page 10, there was no way out of it.
And I mean, that's the standard Justice League stuff,
right?
My argument to that would be that is establishing this is the Justice League story you've read everywhere else, and then immediately saying that's nothing compared to the new world we're going to explore because we're expanding the universe. Here are like all these things you've never heard of before happening at once. I think that's the intention there. Whether it works or doesn't, I feel it's up to personal opinion. But I feel like there is a direct, there's an intent narratively with that.
Okay. I mean, I guess I can see it. That is always a really tricky thing when it's like, no, you're intended to feel overwhelmed. Because I've definitely used that argument. And people are like, oh man, I find this scene so X. I'm like, well, that's the intent, is to make you feel X. And so it's like, it's always kind of weird when you're in a place and you're like, yeah, that was the intention. Okay, well, it was a bad intent. It was a poor choice. I don't really know what to, you know, I guess the fairest way to say it would be, it may have been the intended choice, doesn't necessarily mean it was the right choice, at least for me.
I think that's a strong way to put it. No, I feel that. I think that can apply. It's one of those things where this book is so experimental and really just, you can tell Snyder's wanting to write Justice League forever. So that's probably why he's shooting every single idea in the book he has out. And again, it's not the end. This dude really is just an idea machine. So that I will give him props for. And I feel like one of the strengths of that, specifically because this was big in his Batman run, and I'm in agreement with you where I don't like where he did it in his Batman run, but I do like it where he uses it here for two specific things. I love the descriptions of the whole of Justice and the Legion of Doom.
Oh yeah, that was good.
Snyder loves to describe buildings. It has always never worked for me before. when you're actually describing important thematic like fixtures of the DC universe with the Legion of Doom and the Justice League, and you make it that Superman brought in a material that will make it light when it's at night, and then the Legion of Doom headquarters can never be seen. Like, that's so good.
Yeah, I agree. That was a really cool moment. That was one of the things, like, when the issue was first coming out, and I was listening to reviews and stuff, and they're like, "Oh, this is so cool! The whole Justice is made of material that never gets dark." I was like, "Okay, you're kind of getting me, because that's pretty neat." I want to read the abridged version of this.
You read the editor.
Right. Ugh.
That's one of those things where the minutiae of the detail and the amount of text Snyder likes to do really does kind of... I think I would agree more with your points if there were lesser artists on this book. Because Jamez especially, forgive me if I'm butchering that name, but he really portrays these ideas in such a cool way that even when there's a lot of things happening, I'm always kind of able to follow. Whereas for like some people wouldn't be like, this would just be a complete mess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that. What is something about this? What else? What are other things about this that really stand out as just really great moments to you?
Just individual moments. I really like the I will say that for later because Lex Luthor in this is the standout for me, so I'll talk about that in a bit. But individual Liga moments, I really do like the idea of the Flash just purely having to stop every single cell in his body in a very meditative state. That's a big Dragon Ball kind of thing. I like seeing that. I also think the idea of the Johns connecting to the world and all their emotions all at once, bringing out the white light on Earth was just such a cool reveal. Like seeing the Earth with the White Lantern symbol is such a cool image.
Yeah, I agree with that. For me, some of the stuff I liked, like I genuinely enjoyed the way that the Legion of Doom was written here. I thought it's such a bad plan every time Lex Luthor does it. It never works. I don't know why he keeps trying. With the fucking Legion, but like I don't know, this time around the way he brought everyone in and like kind of had this like devil at the crossroads kind of attitude and these one-on-one conversations with everyone. I liked that quite a bit. I thought that was pretty good. What else did I like about this that I haven't already talked about? I don't know. Why don't you just gush about Lex Luthor?
Alright then, I'm gonna gush about Lex Luthor. Holy crap, was this such a breath of fresh air after the New 52 ever since Morrison was just skirting around. Oh, Lex Luthor's a hero, kinda, maybe. He's kinda dodgy, but no one's gonna do anything about it, but we're not gonna make that into a narrative. We're just gonna leave it there. But we finally just say, fuck it. He's the best supervillain in DC, and we're gonna use him like that. Here's why Lex Luthor, despite just being a regular man, is like the biggest threat the Justice League will ever face. Just that whole issue that Tynion and Snyder wrote together is just gold. Where he goes to gets invite to his father's old like drinking buddies, and he just blows them all up. And then by chance, because he has the vision, he can see the piece of the totality, and then he decides, oh, I'm gonna rethink everything I've got, because from the stuff that happened in No Justice, which is like, again, might as well be like volume 0 of this run. He goes and decides, well, I'm gonna see if who's right in the end. and he reworks a mother box to go into the future, 1 million's in the future, he finds Lex Luthor is law. Lex Luthor was right. He won over the hearts and minds of everyone. Humanity has conquered the universe, and they all believe in Lex. But he undoes that future himself because it didn't happen while he was alive. That's such a fucking power move. You won!
Yeah, that was one of the things I did want to give some credit to as well. I did think that Lex was written really, really well here. Where it's just that level of super genius that, like, you just have to make him kind of crazy. Because that's the only way he could be more of a genius. You know? He's like, just a little unhinged. Maybe that's why Joker hangs out with him. He's like, oh, Lex, you're nuts. So, yeah, I did think that Lex was written really well here. It is nice to see him just be, like, the legitimate threat. Because he's usually so... Going up against Superman so often, it's just like he's got his balls cut off half the time. Because he's just so, like... He's just so outdone all the time that it's nice to see him at least vicariously put up against the other heroes and just his ability to kind of run circles around him, you know?
No, it's as a big fan of the super genius Lex over the businessman Lex, I'm so happy Snyder seems to be as well, where it's such a small aspect of him in this one. He is just a mad scientist here, and like the greatest mad scientist the world has ever seen. And getting him to just flex those muscles and just how his interactions with all the different villains and how he built the Legion of Doom, and just the opening with Vandal Savage where he just completely reboots any idea of like a generic Justice League villain. But he's just like, no, we're not doing that. we do like the moment where he's like, oh, we'll be your new Injustice gang, and he's like, you really should have brought a damn Legion. Like that's a good moment. So all of the Lex stuff here is fantastic, and it just keeps getting better going forward. He's definitely the star of the run for me, and as a big Lex Luthor fan, it's very awesome to see him finally. Because again, I can't remember the last time he was the main threat of a book. Like since New 50, even in Morrison's action, he's just around. He's not the big villain. Like it's been so long since Lex Luthor has been a threat, and this was the arc that introduced it. Year of the Villain currently going on is all about that, but all that comes from this, and it made me really happy to see it. And rereading it, I like it just as much knowing where it goes up eventually. One thing I do like as well is the characterization of all the other villains here. Like, I think I really like, just a small scene, but I really like the scene when we get a glimpse into Grodd's backstory.
Yeah, that was a good one, wasn't it? Keep dancing, please, I can see the bone. Oh, that was something.
Like,
yeah.
That's legit one of the best Gorilla Grodd moments I've ever seen in my entire time, because it's just...
No, you shut your whore mouth. Okay? Him fucking saying it'll be an honor to kill Barack Obama is clearly...
That's the best. I said one of Mr. Ian.
This shit's so
That's the next tier. That's like, oh, for God, can never be touched fictional masterpiece tier. This is just, oh, that's a good moment here. But like, the whole idea of bringing all these people who would never work together into a team just on the sole factor of you are your basic instincts. Don't strive to be greater. Accept your fate and embrace it and have fun with it. Really does work with all of these characters for different reasons, though. Like, it works with Cheetah, works with Black Manta, works with Sinestro, works with Joker, but each of them have a completely different view on what that means. Mm-hmm. Which I think really works for justifying a thematic reason why the Legion of Doom is together, rather than just, oh, they're supervillains, and each of them are the villains of the main hero, so of course they're here. Like, Snyder really tries to make all of it tie in for like this grander symbolic reason, to the point where the logo for Justice looks like the Hall of Justice and the logo for Doom looks like the Legion of Doom headquarters, and like that's just the cosmic symbols, and all this shit is just I eat it up. It's my candy with comics.
No, I thought that was all really good. Like, one of my biggest problems all the time is with Sinestro. It never makes sense for him to be on these teams. It never makes a goddamn lick of sense for Sinestro to be on the Legion of Doom or in the Injustice Gang. If anything, he'd be kicking these guys' asses. But I will give Snyder some credit. The way, or Snyder and Tinian, I guess, the way that Lex courts Sinestro onto that team really worked. It really made a lot of sense. You know, one of the funny things is, since the Johns era, it wouldn't make a lot of sense for basically any Green Lantern villain to be on the Injustice Gang or Legion of Doom. Like, they all have such very specific motivations that, like, just do not gel well with others. Red Lanterns are basically space punishers, so they're definitely not going to join a crime syndicate. Fucking Star Sapphire, no, they're about trying to spread love and peace through the galaxy now. Larfleeze, you couldn't get him to join a team unless you really, really offer him something, and even then, he's kind of inept. So, like, maybe you could make Larfleeze join. Sinestro, again, he sees himself more as, like, Space Batman. He's really not going to be interested in joining a team like that unless you can give something very, very personal for him to kind of get behind. And here they did, and it was just a really impressive use of that.
And as a Sinestro fan, I'll just say, now, how do you feel about the return to his OG colors and given that a reason?
You know, Sinestro worked so hard to get his own core, and he has abandoned it so many times. You know, I thought it was an interesting argument. I'll give it that. I like the fact that there's an out, I gotta be honest, with the fact that it controls you. I kind of like the idea that, like, maybe he was going to try to entertain it. Like, it lends itself to a retcon, let me put it that way, because you could easily make a story where it was like, oh, he was just trying to toy with Lex, and then when he was going to get the ultraviolet light, then he was going to, you know, try to take control of it. And so you could maybe make an argument that, like, he was going to try that, but it enforces so much control over you that just wasn't realistic. I doubt it, but, you know, I like that there's an out at least. To be honest, I'm not a huge fan of Sinestro leaving the Corps. I thought that was kind of an odd choice, but, like, I believed it enough within the confines of the story. I'll put it that way.
That works then. I'm just curious about how you stood on that, because it's a kind of a big change of the character. That will probably not stick because, again, Yellow Lantern Sinestro has got so much embedded into the pop culture history of the world that it is probably his more well-known look, even compared to his original costume, which is kind of crazy, which shows you the influence Johns has.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I'm trying to remember, do we get a scene where Lex courts Cheetah, or did I just, like, completely blank on it?
No, we don't get to see him talk to Black Manta and Cheetah.
Okay. It's a little disappointing.
It's because they're the focus of the next arc.
Oh, okay. All right. I like the scene where the Legion of Doom has such a, like, DC Super Friends villain moment where, like, they're just running scared of Aquaman's giant shark. That just felt like something right out of that old shitty Scooby-Doo style animation. It's like, Joker, teleport us away now! It felt so on point with that.
That was pretty great. I now see someone to do that in, like, a Benny Hill style animation where it's a 2D with giant shark JPEG slowly moves across the screen trying to eat the Legion of Doom.
Okay, let me ask you this, because I think this was probably my biggest complaint. Ignoring my Snyderisms. The whole Hawk Girl and the Totality kind of rejecting Lex Luthor in favor of her.
Mm-hmm.
Does that feel cheap to you?
No, because again, this being the first, if this was like the conclusion of like another arc that had been started before and was leading up all to this, then I would say yes. But this is clearly setting up for the story to come. This is clearly being like, it's a mystery that will be solved. It's not, oh, we don't have an answer for this, so we're going to end it here and you'll never understand why that's going to happen. I feel like she also kind of she needed the moment. Like, Hawkgirl's hard to write moments for, and I will say this story arc and like the retcons to her wings and stuff and what they're made of and what they do, I do think is a big effort from Steiner trying to make her kind of interesting, or at least kind of cool. Like, when it's just bird wings, like, get out of there. But this I feel like tying the Ant Metal and all of that into like the Source Wall, and that's her connection to that, and just in general, Lex Luthor always thinks he's the chosen one, so him getting his comeuppance like that is a trope I kind of revel in, because he is without a doubt really close, but he thinks he's the absolute be-all end-all, so when he's not, and that's what's his undoing, is it's the one thing he couldn't foresee, because he just can't imagine that. Whereas if he uses intelligence without his ego, he maybe could have seen that coming.
Okay. I think that's fair. I don't know, it was just... I guess I wish it hadn't been at the climax, you know? Or if it had to be, I guess I wish that it was set up a little bit earlier than that. Because it is one of those things that just happens so suddenly. And if the book were focused a little bit more, if there weren't 12,000 threats running around at the same time, there probably would have been space to focus on that a little bit more and do a little bit more work to set it up. Because as is, yeah, you're right, it is setting something up to solve later on, but as is, in the moment, it's kind of like the heroes didn't win because they were better than the villains, the heroes won because they were lucky, you know? And that is a trope I always... It's not that you can't use it, but I do always get worried about it, you know?
I can see that. I can definitely see that argument. It is something that goes back to, I think, the inherent problem of this arc, which is the compression. It really did need more space, not even more issues. It's just the story didn't need so many elements all at once into it, even though it's not by accident. It's just, I do feel like it didn't quite play out the way it was intended, or it was just something that shouldn't really have been tried in such a all-at-once fashion.
Yeah, because there's like moments that I think are legitimately cool. Like, okay, the Flash made a car that can, you know, drive on the Speed Force. That's kind of neat. And Jon Stewart's going to be the one riding in it. That is actually pretty cool. But it's just like, it's so periphery to everything else that's going on. And to the point where, like, how the fuck did Sinestro stop that thing? Like, just, what? It leaves these really weird kind of like lingering moments for me. Because I'm like, how did he catch up to it? Okay, well, let's assume that he realizes it's just circling the globe over and over again. Still, how do you stop that? You know?
I mean, it is established early on that the ultraviolet light can keep up with the Speed Force because it doesn't work on foot.
Fair. But then he comes in with like a witty quip.
Because he's Sinestro and he's that good. Yeah, you're right. You're 100% right. I'm just trying to... I think there is an explanation there, but it is something where you think 2 seconds at a lot of this stuff, and you're like, hang on a gosh darn minute.
Yeah, and again, it'd be less of a problem if it weren't like, oh, this is such a cool moment, but it's like just buried, you know? Like that's the problem I have with it. It's like, oh, these like the stuff that stands out is like relatively good, I do legitimately like, but the problem is it's just kind of surrounded by stuff, like by just so much that it gets like buried, and so it's losing those cool moments in these other, you know, more murky moments.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely it's a frantic book. It's a book with a lot of focuses all at once, and that kind of diminishes the individual parts.
You know, like Steve and I remember at one point had a whole conversation about good is not a ratio, something that he like vehemently disagrees with me on. But I do legitimately think that. Like, I do think you can potentially have a show. He used the example of a television show, so I'll stick to that. You can have a show that has more mediocre or bad episodes than it does good episodes and still have a really good show, whereas you can have another show that has more good episodes than it does mediocre or bad episodes, and it still won't be as good a show, because I don't think good is like a ratio. And so while there's a lot of things that I like in this Justice League story, where there's a lot of like really good things just on their own that if we were to rack them up and give them points, you know, they probably outnumber the problems I have with it. But it's not, but all things aren't equal is what it comes down to. And so I think that's like the best way I'm going to be able to describe this that takes me out of the I don't like Scott Snyder's work thing.
I can. There's a logic to that. I do feel like that's a good way to phrase how much is going on that individually you can appreciate, but as a whole, it doesn't necessarily mean you enjoy it. So, for me, I guess that's just. I don't think there's any bad here. There's nothing here that's really made me think, oh, I don't like that choice, or oh, I don't think that's a good idea, which normally does like lower something for me. Nearly every idea and concept introduced in this, and like choice with this, like the team roster stuff, I'm 100% on board with. I do just think it is an execution in the sheer quantity of the things that go in that do hold this part of the room back for me. But maybe that is just because this is the first time, because Scott Snyder comes from horror comics, and then he goes to Batman, and then he did the DC Metal, which was his first attempt at this. And Metal has this problem too, where Metal's really frantic. And then this comes on, and it kind of fulfills that same kind of thing, where it's just like so much at once. So I feel that is just kind of growing pains of doing a team book, where you want to give everyone all these moments at once, but because you've given everyone moments, no one gets the moment. Which does get solved later on, where like we continue we never get to what you were describing as your ideal Justice League, which is more the Morrison approach, where it's the team get the moment, like a duo get the moment. But you do get to, you follow the individual character focus parts, and that improves to the point where you just get issues focusing on one character, but that's a really good issue of that character. And it goes from less of a ensemble cast book, which it still is, but it's as if it was a book where every member gets their own. It's as if you got a Hawkgirl book, a Martian Manhunter book, a Superman book, a Batman book, all into one, without them being a team book, I guess is the way. Like it's not written as team, it's written as every character gets an arc and a moments, and I appreciate that for that, and that's definitely what's seeded here. But it's an approach I can see turning people away from Justice League.
Okay. Well, yeah, I don't think I really have much else to add or say about this one. I'll say this, I guess. I'm not disappointed that I read it. I'm not, like, upset that I read it, because there was enough buzz around this book that it did legitimately have me curious, and I'm glad that I got to have that curiosity, satiated. I'm glad I got moments from this that I could enjoy. Again, I have absolutely no problem with it just being canon now that Superman has a really, really great Batman impression. Because it reminds me of that episode of the animated series where he goes and he has to pretend to be Batman for an episode, and they just have Kevin Conroy voicing Superman, voicing Batman. It legitimately reminds me of that. And that's that kind of fun, charming, Silver Agey bullshit that I can just eat that shit up. And again, there's stuff in here that I do really like, but overall I just don't think it's great. And that for me personally it definitely doesn't work, but also just feigning objectivity, I do think that there are problems that just would be really hard to ignore. But if you can look past them, I do think there is some good here to enjoy.
Just curious because I feel like we're closing up here, but I do want to touch on this because I think it's a big part of what this wave of DC was trying to do. Out of the 3 Justice League books, you read Odyssey, right?
I read the first 3 issues.
I mean, that's compared to this, that's half of that, so you can still maybe get a good. How do you feel about the 3 Justice League books? Do you think it was a good idea? And how do you think this was? Does you think this offers something different from Justice League Dark to warrant them being multiple books?
I mean, yeah. The team dynamic in Dark is much different than this. These are the old friends getting together. Dark is this is a job, because those personalities just do not mesh well together. Sorry.
Bless you.
Everyone's favorite part of the podcast. Sorry. Might have to edit that out. The personalities in Dark just do not mesh well together, but that's in an intentional way. Odyssey is fucking weird. I do think that I think the Initiative is a really strong move because we've had so many family books for a long time that it does, at least on some level, make sense for there to be multiple Justice League teams. I do think, if nothing else, you can make a good argument for it. Let me put it that way. And as far as the execution, even if I'm not liking this is a book that is doing well, I assume. I'm liking Justice League Dark, so hey, 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
I mean, yeah, that's basically where I stand on it as well. I think it's a good move that's expanded how ballsy DC's able to get. I do really think the 1-2 punch of Tynion and Snyder have really kind of shook off some of the ideas that, the fact that we opened this book with the Justice League 1 million Alpha, and then we see Commandy, and then where we are now, where all that's getting paid off, and then Batman can casually say our allies in the multiverse and Dark Knight's Metal. It's just, there is really these young guns taking the inspiration from Morrison and injecting it onto the widest scale possible in the biggest books out there really have improved DC's image for me. And it really feels we're so far now from the New 52 imperative art. Everything's got to have a real explanation. Everything's got to be somewhat gritty and dark and grounded. But we're so far past that. Ironically, Snyder being the golden boy of the New 52, the one who made his big splash there, he's the one who's going the furthest away from it with this now. And I really appreciate that, just because Rebirth fixed the tone problem, but this created the universe again that I love so much for DC compared to Marvel. It's just the wacky shit.
I can see that. I can understand that. Let me ask you if you had a preference before reading this, and now if you have a preference after this. Do you prefer the Watchtower or the Hall of Justice before reading this? Which one was your preference?
I never liked the Justice League having an orbital death cannon.
It didn't have to necessitate a death cannon.
Every version of it has a death cannon.
No, the moon base doesn't.
I'm pretty sure, like, whenever it's floating, it has a death cannon. So that already put me off from it, and the Hall of Justice just made sense as, like, even before reading this, like, of course the Justice League would have a place where people could come and see them. Like, Batman, maybe not. Batman's not going to be hanging out there. But Superman's probably got a mailbox there where people can send them, like, Christmas presents and stuff, like where he wants to send them out to children and stuff. Like, that show, like, that's just wholesome.
Okay. I don't know. I never really cared for the Hall of Justice. I do really like the Young Justice explanation. Like, yeah, there is a Hall of Justice, and it's a fucking tourist trap that helps fund the League. Now here's the real base. I was like,
Young Justice sucks. So.
Oh, you just mean now.
Definitely. Even then, after this, if you could have swayed me before, your time's over now, because it will never get dark. So that's immediately instant points.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. All right. Let's go ahead and go on to ratings then. What will you rate this?
Yeah, like I say, this arc really did kick off one of my favorite Justice League runs. This is definitely the weakest of that run so far, but even then I can still appreciate it as a fun time to have, because I think it's a good, albeit messy, story for the Justice League. And sets up a lot of interesting ideas, and Lex Luthor's my boy, so that gets instant points. So I'm going to give this 4 out of 5... baby turtles.
Okay. Again, for what works in here, it's really not enough to really make me want to go back and read this again. So I'll give this... you're gonna be mad at me. I'm gonna give this 2.5 out of 5 Speed Force cars.
I'm not mad at you, just disappointed.
Okay, fair enough. Oh, man. I don't know what we're going to talk about next week. I need to come up with a topic, or maybe I need to bug Steve to get his ass back here and come up with a topic. We'll figure something out. We'll be back next week, folks. Until then, I'm the Philosopher.
And I'm a geek for fun.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.